Maya, we need to talk. My brother's voice came from behind the closed door of my home office, low and deliberate, the way it always sounded when he had already made a decision and was simply waiting for me to catch up. I set down my coffee, saved the file I had been working on, and told myself to breathe before opening the door. He was standing in the hallway with his arms crossed. Behind him, his wife Rachel leaned against the wall, watching me with an expression I could only describe as patient. As if they had rehearsed this. As if the outcome had already been settled. I had a bad feeling before either of them said a single word. My name is Maya. I am 31 years old and I work as a UX designer, fully remote, fully freelance. I have been doing this for 6 years, long enough to build a reputation and a client list that lets me choose my own hours and work from anywhere with a decent internet connection. To people who do not understand freelancing, this sounds like a vacation. To people who do, it sounds like exactly what it is. A business I built from nothing. One that requires focus, consistency, and the kind of uninterrupted concentration that most open offices could never provide. For the past 2 years, I had been renting the second floor of my brother's house. He owned a large colonial in a quiet neighborhood outside of Columbus, Ohio, and when he offered me the spare upper floor at a rate well below market, I accepted. We drew up a simple agreement. I paid on time every month. I kept my space clean. I stayed out of their way, and they stayed out of mine. For the first year, it worked. Then his company downsized. My brother lost his job 8 months ago. Rachel, who had been working part-time as a dental hygienist, picked up extra shifts, but it was not enough. They had 2 kids, 7 and 9, and a mortgage that had always depended on 2 full incomes. I watched the stress slowly change the atmosphere of the house, the way a shift in weather pressure changes a room before a storm. I was sympathetic. I even offered to help, transferred an extra $500 one month without being asked, just to give them breathing room. I told myself they would figure it out. People did. What I did not anticipate was the specific way they would figure it out. Maya, my brother said that evening, standing in my hallway with his arms crossed, you work from home, so you have flexibility. We need you to watch the kids in the morning so Rachel can pick up a double shift. Just 4 hours, Monday through Friday. I stared at him. 4 hours a day, 5 days a week was 20 hours a week. That was half a standard workday. Every week? Indefinitely. I had deadlines. I had client calls scheduled at 9 in the morning. I had a contract with a tech startup in San Francisco that paid my rent 3 times over and required me to be available during Pacific Time business hours, which meant my mornings were the most critical window I had. I explained all of this as calmly as I could. I told him I was not free in the mornings. I told him my schedule was not flexible in the way he imagined. I told him I would love to help, but I could not simply absorb 20 hours of childcare into my work week without something collapsing. Rachel tilted her head and smiled at me in a way that was not quite a smile. But you are home, she said. It is not like you are going anywhere. That sentence sat in my chest like a stone. I said I would think about it. They went back downstairs. I closed my office door and sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the wall, understanding for the first time that something had shifted in the house, and not in a way that would easily shift back. 3 days later, I came out of my office at noon to make lunch and found both kids at my kitchen table eating cereal. My kitchen, the small kitchenette I had specifically set up on the upper floor so that I would not need to go downstairs during the workday, stocked with my groceries, cleaned by me, organized exactly the way I needed it. I asked where Rachel was. My nephew looked up from his bowl. Mom said you would watch us today. She had a shift. I stood in my own kitchen doorway and understood that the discussion was apparently over. A decision had been made without me, announced to the children as fact, and I had simply not been informed. I watched them finish their cereal. I answered their questions. I did not call Rachel and scream into the phone, though the urge was significant. Instead, I quietly went back to my desk, emailed my client an apology, rescheduled a call I had spent 2 weeks setting up, and lost 4 hours of billable work. When my brother came home that evening, I told him plainly that what happened could not happen again. He looked at me with genuine confusion. You were home, though. You were right there. The logic, to him, was airtight. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated itself in smaller ways. I would find food missing from my refrigerator, the expensive sourdough I had bought from the bakery downtown, the Greek yogurt I kept on the top shelf, a block of sharp cheddar I had been rationing. I would come out of a client call to find crayon marks on the hallway wall just outside my office door. Once I found my younger niece sitting on the floor of my office quietly going through my desk drawer while I had been in the bathroom. She was 7 and curious and entirely innocent, but someone had led her up the stairs. I started locking my office door. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I was on a video call with the founder of the startup, walking through a prototype I had spent 3 weeks building. It was the kind of call where everything depended on a clean presentation, no interruptions, no noise, complete focus. I had told my brother and Rachel that morning that I had a critical call at 2 o'clock and needed the floor to be quiet. They had both nodded. At 2:17, someone knocked on my office door. Not softly. The kind of knock that small hands make when they have been told to do it and are doing it with enthusiasm. The founder paused mid-sentence. I smiled at the camera and said, "Give me 1 moment," and muted myself and went to the door. It was my nephew. He was holding a permission slip for a school field trip. "Rachel said you would sign it because she is busy," he said helpfully. I looked at him for a long moment. I signed the permission slip. I went back to my desk and unmuted myself and salvaged what I could of the call. The founder was polite, but the momentum was gone and I knew it. 2 days later, she pushed the project timeline back by a month and reduced the scope. I lost $1,100 in contracted deliverables. That night, I sat down with a spreadsheet and calculated what I had lost in the 6 weeks since this arrangement had unofficially begun. Rescheduled calls, missed deadlines, late fees waived as goodwill, a contract reduced in scope. It came to a number that made me close the laptop and stare at the ceiling for a while. I went downstairs and knocked on the living room door. My brother and Rachel were watching television. I told them what had happened on the call. I told them the number. I told them, as clearly as I knew how, that this could not continue. Rachel sat up straighter. "Maya, we are struggling. You know that. We are not asking for anything unreasonable. You are home all day. The kids need supervision. We cannot afford after-school care right now, and you are right upstairs," my brother added. Quieter, "You know if things were reversed, I would help you." I looked at him. I thought about the $500 I had transferred 2 months ago that neither of them had acknowledged. I thought about the $1,100 I had lost to their scheduling decisions. I thought about the permission slip signed in the middle of a client presentation. I said, "I understand you are struggling. I am not able to be a free childcare solution. I am running a business." Rachel's expression shifted into something I had not seen before. Harder, more deliberate. "Fine," she said. "Then maybe we need to revisit the rental arrangement. This is our house, Maya. We have been more than fair with the rate. If you cannot contribute to the household in other ways, we will need to charge you what the space is actually worth." There it was. The same architecture as a threat, built from the same materials. Comply or pay more. Stay in line or lose the roof over your head. What they did not know was that I had been quietly planning for a long time. Not because I had predicted this exact moment, but because I had always understood that depending on a family member for housing introduced a category of risk that had no place in a business I was trying to build. 2 years ago, when I first moved in, I had also started looking. Quietly, on my own time, without telling anyone. 14 months ago, I had put a deposit on a studio condominium in the short north neighborhood of Columbus. It was small, well-designed, and completely mine. I had been making payments on it while simultaneously paying rent upstairs, which had required discipline but not sacrifice. The condo had been sitting ready for 3 months, fully furnished, waiting for the moment I decided to use it. I looked at Rachel and said, "That is a fair point. Let me think about it." She looked slightly surprised, as if she had expected more resistance. I went back upstairs and opened my laptop and sent one email to my property manager at the condo. "I am planning to transition in the next 30 days. Please confirm the unit is ready." Then I opened a new document and began writing. The next morning, my brother knocked on my office door and asked if we could talk. I told him I was available at noon. He nodded and left. At noon, he came upstairs and sat in the chair across from my desk, which I had never offered anyone before, and I slid a single printed page across the desk toward him. "What is this?" he said, picking it up. "It is a 30-day notice of intent to vacate," I said. "Per our original agreement, I am required to give 30 days. I am giving you 30 days. His face went through several changes in quick succession. He set the paper down. "Maya, come on. We can work this out." I told him there was nothing to work out. The arrangement had changed in ways I had not agreed to and could not sustain. I was not angry. I was not punishing him. I was making a business decision the same way I made all my business decisions, based on what was sustainable and what was not. He left the room without another word. The next 30 days were not peaceful. My brother cycled through several approaches. First came the guilt. You are abandoning us when we need you most. Then came the reframing. You are being selfish and dramatic over a few hours of babysitting. Then came the escalation. Do you understand what you are doing to this family? Rachel stopped speaking to me directly and communicated only through my brother, which I found easier. The kids were kept downstairs, which I also found easier. On the 22nd day, I came back from a coffee shop where I had gone to take a long call and found that someone had been in my office. I knew immediately because I keep my desk in a specific order, a habit so ingrained that I cannot explain it to people who do not share it. I simply know when something has moved. My external hard drive had been shifted. The drawer I kept locked was still locked, but the small framed photo I kept on the corner of the desk, a picture of me and my college roommate at graduation, had been moved 4 inches to the left. I had installed a small wireless camera in my office the week before. I had positioned it behind a row of books on the shelf, angled at the desk. I had told no one. I reviewed the footage that evening. Rachel had come upstairs with a key, let herself into my office, sat at my desk, and spent 11 minutes attempting to access my laptop. She tried the keyboard twice. She lifted the laptop lid to trigger the camera, saw my lock screen, and put it down. Then she opened my desk drawer with what appeared to be a letter opener, found it locked, and left. I watched the footage 3 times. I felt something very cold move through me, not quite anger, something more final than anger. I called my lawyer the next morning. I had retained her 6 months ago for a contract dispute with a client, and we had stayed in touch. I described what had happened and sent the footage. She called me back within an hour. What Rachel had done constituted unauthorized access to a dwelling, potential violation of computer access laws depending on what she had been attempting to do, and given that it was caught on camera, it was documented. She advised me to move my timeline up, secure all original work files immediately, and say nothing to anyone in the house. I spent that evening quietly and methodically moving every hard drive, every important document, every irreplaceable object I owned into my car. I boxed my personal belongings. I called my college roommate, Jess, who was the only person who knew about the condo, and told her to meet me the following morning. I left 8 days early. At 6:15 in the morning, I carried the last box downstairs. My brother was already awake, standing in the kitchen with a mug of coffee. He looked at the boxes. He looked at me. His face did something complicated. You said 30 days, he said. I gave you 22. Since I had prepaid the full month, I said, you are not losing anything financially. I would appreciate the return of my security deposit within the standard legal window. He did not respond. Rachel came into the kitchen in her bathrobe. Her eyes went to the boxes. Her jaw tightened. Maya, she said. I looked at her and said, the footage from my office camera is currently in the possession of my attorney. She is advising me on next steps. Rachel's face went very still. I picked up the last box and walked to the front door and did not look back. Jess's car was in the driveway. We loaded everything in 12 minutes. The door closed behind me and I felt the morning air on my face and thought, there it is. That is what free feels like. The condo was everything I had imagined it would be. 1,200 square feet on the 4th floor of a building 6 blocks from the best coffee in the city. South-facing windows that filled the office with natural light from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, which happened to be my exact peak working hours. A kitchen that contained only the food I had purchased. A hallway with no small hands knocking on any doors. I set up my desk in 2 hours. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. The quiet was so complete that the first morning I sat there for 10 minutes and simply listened to it. My brother called 4 times that first day. I let all 4 calls go to voicemail. The voicemails moved in a predictable arc. The first was confusion. The second was frustration. The third was my mother's voice, which surprised me enough that I almost picked up, but I had not yet processed enough to have that conversation. The fourth was Rachel, her tone careful and controlled, asking me to call her back because there were some things she felt we should discuss like adults. I did not call back. 3 days later, my Aunt Sandra sent me a message on social media. Sandra lives in Cincinnati and is the family's primary distributor of information and judgment. Grace, I heard you walked out on your brother and his family while they are going through the hardest time of their lives. You should be ashamed. I assumed she meant Maya. Close enough. My mother, I later learned, had called Sandra and two other relatives with her version of events. In her version, I was a cold, selfish younger sister who had abandoned my struggling family over a minor disagreement about chores. The word chores was, I thought, a creative characterization of what had actually happened. I spent an evening thinking about whether to respond. Then I thought about Rachel's hands on my desk drawer with a letter opener and decided yes. I created a group message and added every relative who had contacted me. I wrote it the way I write client briefs. Short paragraphs, clear sequence of events, specific dollar amounts, no adjectives I could not support with documentation. I described the original agreement. I described the unofficial childcare arrangement that had been implemented without my consent. I described the $1,100 lost to interrupted work. I described the footage from my office. Then I attached 3 screenshots from the camera footage, time-stamped, showing Rachel at my desk. I sent it and put my phone face down and made dinner. When I checked it an hour later, the group had gone quiet, in a way that felt different from ordinary quiet. The first response came from my cousin Derek, who I had always liked. He wrote, "I didn't know any of this. I am sorry that happened to you. That broke something loose." A relative I barely knew responded that she had always thought Rachel had boundary issues. My uncle, who had never once taken my side in any family dispute in my entire life, wrote that breaking into someone's office was not acceptable regardless of circumstances. Sandra went silent. My mother, who had been added to the group by my cousin without my knowledge, left without responding. My brother sent me a private message 2 days later. It was the longest message he had ever sent me. It moved through several stages, starting with justification and ending somewhere near an acknowledgement that some things had gone too far, particularly Rachel's behavior, which he said he had not known about. I read it carefully. I did not respond immediately. I needed time to determine what I actually wanted from him, which was a question I had not yet answered for myself. What I did respond to, and immediately, was the letter I received 3 weeks after moving out. It was from my brother, handwritten, which was unusual enough to make me pay attention. Inside was a single page and a printed spreadsheet. The letter explained that since I had vacated the property early, the household had been significantly impacted, and that given my apparent financial stability, he felt it was reasonable to request that I cover certain costs. The spreadsheet listed: lost rental income for the 8 days I vacated early, 1 month's after-school childcare fees, now that I was no longer available to help, and something listed as emotional distress to household, which had no dollar amount attached but was included, it seemed, for moral weight. The total at the bottom was $3,800. I read it twice. I set it down. I picked it up and read the after-school childcare line again. He was billing me for childcare that he had demanded I provide for free. The sentence structure of that idea took a moment to fully assemble in my mind. Then I scanned the entire letter and the spreadsheet and sent it to my attorney with a single line: "Please advise." She called within 2 hours, and I could tell from the quality of her silence before she spoke that she had read it carefully. "This has no legal standing," she said. "What he is describing is not a contractual obligation. The early vacate was within your rights, given that prepayment covered the remaining period. The childcare fees are not your liability under any interpretation of your rental agreement." She paused. "What would you like to do?" I thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. "Send the cease and desist," I said. "The full version. And I want it sent certified mail." She had the letter ready within 24 hours. It detailed the legal status of his claims, which was none. It outlined the documented unauthorized access to my home office and personal property by Rachel, including the time-stamped footage. It stated clearly that any further attempts to contact me with financial demands, or to disparage my character to family members, or any third parties with false or misleading information, would result in legal action. It was 8 pages long. My attorney said it was one of the more comprehensive cease and desist letters she had drafted for a non-corporate client. I paid the invoice without blinking. By the time that certified envelope arrived at my brother's house, I was sitting at my desk with afternoon light coming through the south window. 3 deliverables completed before lunch, a new client contract signed the day before, and a cup of coffee made exactly the way I liked it in a kitchen that contained only the things I had chosen to put there. I thought about what it had cost me to get to this room, not just the legal fees or the condo down payment or the $1,100 of lost work. I thought about the 2 years of small tolerances, the things I had let go because he was family, the line I had moved a little further each time someone pushed it. I thought about how the line keeps moving until you stop moving it. I have not spoken to my brother since sending the cease and desist. I have spoken to my mother twice, briefly, and those conversations were not easy, but they were honest. She is not a villain. She was given one version of events and believed it because it was easier. I understand that. I do not require her to be a villain in order to understand that she was wrong. Rachel has not contacted me. I did not expect her to. My cousin Derek checks in occasionally. He told me recently that my brother found a new job, which I was genuinely glad to hear. That my sister-in-law enrolled the kids in an after-school program which solved the problem that had apparently required my entire career to solve. That things were quieter in the house. I did not feel vindicated by that information. I felt something closer to tired, and then, once the tiredness passed, something cleaner. Relief that it had ended. Quiet gratitude for the room I was sitting in. There is a version of this story where I stayed. Where I absorbed the lost hours and the lost income and the permission slips and the mornings that were no longer mine. Because we are family, and family helps each other. I know that version. I know what it costs. I know how long it takes to understand that the price is not temporary. This is the version where I did not stay. Where I built the exit before I needed it, found it in the dark, and used it. If you are watching this and you are in that house, the one where your boundaries keep getting renegotiated by people who love you but do not quite see you, I want to say this clearly. Protecting your own life is not a betrayal of the people around you. It only feels that way at first. The feeling passes. The relief does not.